not to attend to it. In such a charged scenario, right from the beginning, every scholar grapples with the issue of validity and reliability as these are affected by the funding organizations and the researcher's subjectivity or location, as it could make certain claims Eurocentric, casteist, pro-Islamic, gender-biased, pro-state, and in certain cases rather secularist. As Nathalie Roberts' research, suggests that even extreme secularism is also problematic in certain ways. Hence, theorizing upon the role of local, national, and global political actors continues to be a bigger theoretical and reflective challenge for the researcher in Pakistan. The purportedly native Muslim scholar, belonging to the Ashrafized caste, like myself, working from within the locally grounded pro-Pakistan institution, grapples with the similar issues of validity and reliability of methods, approach, and claims. How authentic can be the research done by a native Muslim and a locally funded institute in Pakistan vis-a-vis foreign researcher funded by a purportedly international or global and secular institution? So these are the, some kind of queries and problems that I am grappling with in terms of methodology and epistemology and location reflexivity. In our case, the pro-state privileged caste bias of the researchers could be a possibility, yet can also be an unintended consequence. An inevitable locational and situational imperative is faced by non-native European scholars, for instance. The other challenge as an anthropologist is to collect the substantial corpus of empirical evidence based on the longitudinal ethnographic and survey-based research. This might require us to conduct episodic fieldwork followed by a couple of social surveys. So far, data or empirical details are not sufficient enough to theorize upon the aspects of conversion that we intend to deal with. There is still a lot of evidence to collect from all stakeholders. The policemen, judges, lawyers, administrators, and inmates of shelter homes and the concerned legislators have not yet been interviewed or approached. Also, FIR's police or court record has not yet been accessed. Given these limitations, one of the aims of this webinar is to engage concerned scholars like you to help out to identify possible institutional and locational biases that reflect from baseline study and may affect our ongoing research. The other aim is to seek critical feedback on the content of the baseline study, the aspect of the issue that may have not been attended or misinterpreted, and lack of synergy between the theoretical position and empirical evidence. Also, on how we can best approach the alleged perpetrator and the victims and what issues and aspects need to be attended while conducting interviews or fieldwork. We have not stopped exploring the issue after the baseline study was published. I have just returned from the field after conducting 18-day intensive field work based on 80 plus interviews with religious clerics involved in conversion and the converts. The queries that were asked revolved around 1,000 figure, which is often presented in media, that 1,000 girls are forcibly converted each year. Age of maturity was also the point of discussion, that what age should be settled upon for the legal purposes or otherwise, and its legal, religious, and social ramifications, and role of wali or guardian. Wali is an Islamic term for a guardian, and family and brotherly and caste and socio-economic push and pull factors. So brotherly and caste, emerge as a major factor for me, especially so far, it seems so. But it is still an ongoing research. So we would like to have further feedback on that as well. So also, who's the actual soft target? Divan or privileged caste Hindu, a Christian, Dalit or a scheduled caste? How important is the factor of prior intimacy with Islam, Muslims and Muslim culture? Because non-Muslims are living within Muslims, which are majority, make up majority, they are considerably influenced or Islamized already before converting. So this also emerged as one of the factors maybe influencing them towards conversion in all sorts of such cases, even mass conversion or individual conversions. So then how to meet the challenge of accessing alleged victims and families and individuals? particularly those families, those who are non-Muslims and who are still somehow not satisfied with this whole scenario in Pakistan, that they still continue to blame that our girls are, should be returned back. If not forced, then at least it is at the brotherly or caste level, it is, they think that it is not justice done to them if their girls are not returned back to them, aged, underaged, or adult. A girl does not matter to them as much as these caste and brotherly based, normative settings that push them to ask for redemption of a sort. So we would like to have feedback on these kind of issues. I hope that our discussion, as it proceeds, many aspects will come into discussion, and it will be very helpful to us in further, extending this study. But I would also ask you all to collaborate with us in any way. We are, ready to be, with us and collaborate with you. As your research scholars, we can come up with a collective study, edited and contributed by each one of you. So each one of you, I think, can contribute to this study in various different ways from your own particular location. So, without further delay, I would now ask Nadeem Gilani to read Nathalie Roberts' comments. Because he could not participate, but he has given some useful comments. So I think that before discussing further baseline study, we should know what Nathalie Roberts has to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sufi Hussain. In fact, Julian had asked this morning if Nathalie Roberts could make it. Yes, we had contacted him, and he was very much part of the discussion that we had. And you'll see that he could not make it in the webinar, but the comments that he has shared with us makes every sense to us, and I'll read them out. Thank you for this report. I am not available to participate in the roundtable discussion, but I will offer some brief comments in case they might be of use to you. Number one, I have read the passages referring to arguments I have made regarding the issue of forced conversion and found them accurately presented. Second, my empirical research covers accusations made by Hindu majoritarians in India against both Christian and Muslim minorities. While I do not regard the concept of forced conversion as automatically suspect, it is certainly dubious. The Indian case where a powerful majority accuses a weak minority of forcing majority community members to convert to the minority religion against their will. In the Pakistan case, the situation is reversed. According to the report, it is minorities, Christians and Hindus, accusing the members of the majority religious community of forcing minorities to convert to the majority. I have no idea whether coercion is in fact involved in these cases, and I have not reviewed the evidence presented by accusing NGOs, but I would stress that it is not prima facie absurd given the power imbalance between communities. To make a confident assessment, one would need to see an independent investigation of actual cases. Ideally, this would involve long-term ethnographic research among the converting organizations that would allow converts to be observed from before the time they convert until afterwards. Thirdly, it is clear that both the Christian and Hindu organizations that make these accusations in Pakistan are invested in keeping their members, and I would be surprised if they did not attempt to pressure them into staying. How far this goes is a subject for further investigation. It would be interesting to know what sort of methods they use. In the case of the Hindu organizations, the report alleges that the parties behind their accusations are high caste Hindus who want to keep Dalit under their own personal control. It would be useful to know more about these communities and the relationship that exists between high caste Hindus and Dalits. Given that Pakistan is Muslim majority nation, I assume that the power of caste Hindus over Dalits is much more limited than it is in Hindu majority India. But in what does this power consist? That is a question for further investigation. Fourthly and lastly, I assume that the Hindus and Christian organizations making these accusations have ulterior motives of their own, apart from that of keeping their communities intact. For example, they are probably appealing to international allies. Whether these appeals are legitimate or not depends on the reality of the situation and whether coercion is indeed being employed by converters. This is a question that would be useful to investigate. I would also add that motives in human actions are almost always multiple and complex. It could be the caste that Christian and Hindu accusers are motivated by anti-Islamic bias and at the same time have a legitimate complaint with respect to forced conversion. These issues need to be kept separate. All best wishes, Nate. So this was from Nathalie Roberts, and progressing further, I think I'll ask first of all Michel Bowen for his comments, and then Sumit Mahaskar, and then Julian, and at the last Said did, and then we'll go on. May I ask Dr. Professor Michel Bowen, sir, your comments, feedback.
Yes. Hello, you can hear me? It's okay?
Yes, we can clearly hear you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this webinar. And of course, I was very interested by the report and by the different presentation. So as I understand, we can share our feedback both on the report and also on the different presentation. So the report was titled Forced Conversion or Phased Conversion, Rhetoric and Reality. And today, the webinar is devoted to exploring religious conversions more especially. So, of course, the issue of conversion is a very important issue in South Asia and in other parts of the world. And since it is a very complex issue, it's very important to find different ways maybe to address it. And in this respect, I have to give the information that myself, I am historian and anthropologist. So of course, I did use the tools of these different fields for addressing the issue, but also I have to say that I never really work on the issue of conversion in Pakistan or in any other country. But as you know very well, when you are doing studies on Muslim society of South Asia, so of course you read a lot of literature about the Muslim societies in South Asia. There is always the issue of conversion, especially how did some part of South Asia were Islamized. And of course, there are different narratives also regarding this historical context. But since I started in telling and saying that the issue of conversion is a very complex issue, first, let me just to focus on some words we are using, because today we are talking in English, we are using the word conversion, and it's very interesting to find out the equivalent in other languages, starting with Urdu, with Sindhi, with Arabic, with Persian, because this word of conversion, of course, it is English, not only in French, it is exactly the same word with different pronunciation, but this word comes from Latin, conversion. And in Latin, so in the Roman Empire, it was not a religious term. It was a secular term, and it means in Latin to turn, to change. So it is a meaning. Of course, I shall not devote all my time to this linguistic approach, but we know very well if you try to find that equivalent of conversion in Arabic, it is a very different conception, original conception. If you look at the root of the word used as equivalence of conversion. So yeah, and maybe, and it is also a comment, a feedback, and also a question for Sophie Hussein, because how to say, yeah, so when I was reading the report, I was thinking about of a kind of historical contextualization, because when I had a look at the bibliography, I was very interested to find out several references devoted to the Church Nama, because when we deal with the issue of conversion and of Islamization of South Asia, and especially of the Indus Valley, of course, the Church Nama is a main reference, the original text written in Persian as we know it, of course. And so it is one of the first evidence, I would say, about how did the Muslim Arabs, following the coming of Muhammad bin Qasim, how did they address, in fact, I mean, the issue of conversion, or in other words, was Muhammad bin Qasim interested into converting all the population of Sindh in the early 8th century. And according to the Church Nama, we know very well that it was not at all a global politics from him. For one good reason, it is that this notion, concept, Islamic concept of Al-Kitab was extended beyond the Christian, beyond the Jews, to the Parsi, to the Hindu. So since this population was considered as being, and the Buddhist, considered as being Al-Kitab, of course, they were not compelled to convert. They could keep their own religion and to be zimmi, and of course to pay the jizya. So it's a very important point to see how did this kind of process when the first Muslim came to Sindh, and especially in relation with the violence which could have played a role in the propagation, in the spread of Islam. So I want to ask maybe Sophie Hussein about this issue of historical contextualization, and also, since he referred the bibliography to several publications related to the Church Nama, I was just wondering why, how to say, he didn't use them more, maybe, of course, as a kind of historical contextualization. So it is not directly involved in his own topic of conversion, forced conversion, or faith conversion. Yeah, and also in the report we can find about the different, I would say, categories of conversion, which were elaborated by different specialists of conversion. And as I said before, and I am not a real specialist of conversion, but so it shows how a complex process it is most of the time, because it is also interacting with social belonging, economic issues, identity markers, symbolic markers, and also, yeah, etc. So I would say that in my own work, the main approach I had in regarding a conversion was through the different process implemented by, it was also a long time back, some century back, but especially implemented by the Ismaili and also the Sufi. Because according to my knowledge, if we turn back to the history and to the first spread of any Islamic persuasion, and how did the first non-Muslim became Muslim, maybe that historically the Ismaili, because as you know, they were present in Sindh, and there was a vassal state of the Fatimid Empire in Cairo. They had really elaborated a process of conversion, finally how to convert Hindu and Buddhist to Islam, of course, to their own persuasion. And so here, the process of conversion was a very gradual process. So it means that it was not asked to the people to change totally one day to the other their faith and their belonging. And so that probably, but I think we don't have so many historical sources, but after this Ismaili proselytism, after them, maybe since the 13th century onwards, the Sufi, and especially first the Sohrawardi, from Multan with Baldin Zakaria, they were working with the same proselytism methodology, so to say. So it is also, and maybe, but more in sin, maybe, that, so it means that the people, they were not from one day to the other, they became Muslim. First, very often, and some in the report you can find it also, they were given their allegiance to a person, to a spiritual guide, so a Sufi guide, for example. But even so, the Sufi guide didn't ask them to erase all their previous traditions, religious traditions regarding different other code. So I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot about this historical contextualization. Yeah, and also I think that this work regarding the issue of conversions in Pakistan is also very closely related to the issue of the religious minorities in Pakistan and of their situation in present-day Pakistan, the evolution of their situation, yeah, especially, for example, it would be very interesting to see what was the evolution of the religious minority rights, so to say, very general word, from the creation of the country in 1947 until today, with the different political regimes, with also the context of the world, of international context, and its impact of the situation of these minorities in Pakistan. Yeah, so it was the feedback I wanted to share with you. And as I said, since I am a historian by training, I know better to some extent the historical sources like the Chachnama and others. And as I say also, I had no opportunity until now to really devote some anthropological work to the issue. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nadeem, Sufi, and everyone. I think the historical context has been laid down by Michelle already. So what I'll do is there are a few points. The report is very well written and it covers wide-ranging issues as far as forced conversion is concerned. There are one or two important issues which have been highlighted in India, not necessarily in connection with the conversion, but I think this might be useful to explore further in your case in Pakistan. I think the first thing that obviously it's an important issue that has been highlighted, and this is being very much discussed in the media in Pakistan. So we clearly know the importance of it. But one thing that actually would be very useful to know is why this is happening now at such a large scale. And the timing of this particular conversion is very important. So, I mean, in the Indian context, the conversions have happened at different historical junctures. We all know, as far as Dalits are concerned, the biggest conversion took place in 1956 under Dr. Ambedkar's leadership. And he took like millions of Dalits into that fold. And that particular movement of religious conversion have taken different forms now. Some of it has become little ritualistic. Some of I mean, a large part of it has become a very political movement. So it has different aspects to it. But I think when it comes to forced conversion, I think what came to my mind was this whole issue of women being abducted and converted. And why women? I think this is where I think the other part I wanted to discuss is that if we like begin to look at the constituency that is being converted, either these are women or these are girls. Okay. Now, if we look at the sociological changes that have taken place in India, particularly in the last 3 decades, we see that one of the biggest challenges that India is facing now, particularly the North Indian belt, the Haryana, not Punjab so much, but for sure Haryana, is the challenge of the missing girls. So you have more male in comparison to women, okay, per thousand population. Okay. Now, how are these particular states coping up with this challenge? Okay. Now, this is where I think Pakistan. This is where one of the ways in which the report can go further when whoever is doing field work, maybe this is the direction one can actually also look at, is the issue of missing girls. Now, obviously, when we look at the issue of missing girls in the case of India, it is very clear that the proportion of missing girls is very high in the case of the landed upper castes in the North India, those who own like huge tracts of land, but also in terms of caste status, they belong to the upper caste community. And interestingly now, I mean, 2-3 decades ago, it was Haryana, which was very much at the top of missing girls, number. But now, if you look at even in states like Maharashtra, where high caste Hindus such as Marathas are there, and these are also the landed families. So you have very high cases of female infanticide, and that is definitely linked to the problem of dowry and the property. So there are problems of division of property, but also big problems of dowry, and that is one of the reasons that is motivating maybe them for opting female infanticide. Now, the reason I'm highlighting this case of missing girls or female infanticide is that then how does one fill the gap? Because as a society, as we move ahead, there are different challenges that come up. And one of the biggest challenge that states like Haryana are facing are for the young men to find marriageable women. Now, this is one of the very interesting phenomena that you have migration of like women from the very poorer areas of Bihar and Jharkhand, where women are migrating to Haryana and other places where there is a big problem of missing girls. Now, obviously, they are paying huge money in these cases, or whatever the money might vary. So in this case, it is not the conversion that is being used to actually address the problem of missing girls. It is through finance that women migrate and then they marry into one of those households who are finding it difficult to find women for their young men. And I think this aspect is in a way missing from the report. So obviously, there are these political reasons that upper caste Hindus in Pakistan want to retain their hegemony. So these are pretty much obvious reasons. I mean, we all know that this is happening also in India, that whichever privileged groups are there in terms of caste, race, or religion, they would like to reproduce their hegemony consistently. But because this is a particular case of girls and women conversion, I think there is a need to look at this particular dimension of female infanticide and the whole issue of missing girls. Now, this is a question to you, Sufi, and all those who are involved in the report, is to see whether what is the population ratio, the male-female ratio within communities. If we have, actually, that would be a very important indicator to understand why women from, say, Dalit communities are being converted and brought back to these kind of groups. The other way of looking at it, which simply means that obviously there are more women within Dalit communities comparison to other communities. Okay, so is the missing girls the link? Okay, and I think this is something that would be very useful for the report. Obviously, those who are on the field can tell us more. And I think this is a great report, particularly because normally when we talk about religion or community, we use these categories very loosely. We tend to overlook the idea, the divisions based on caste when we talk of religion. So when we say Hindu, Muslim, obviously in India, then we don't really talk much about the caste dimensions here. I mean, of course, now things are changing. Now within Muslim communities, the question of caste has really come up in a big way. The Pasmanda Muslim mobilization has been really gaining momentum in both UP and Bihar. So these divisions are also very important. So for example, and this is the last closing point I would like to make, is that so when we look at within Hindus, we of course look at which are the communities which are facing the brunt of this forced conversion. So these girls or women, which caste and community do they belong within the Hindus? So obviously, so one of the guesses that everybody knows is that these women could be coming from pretty much the Dalit communities, or maybe if there are more backward castes within Pakistan among Hindus. Likewise, it is also possible that some of these low caste Muslims or Dalit Muslims are also being, I don't know what is the best way to explain that some of these things, exchanges also might be happening the way it is happening in Haryana, whereby women are being specially, being brought in from far off states for marriages. So is that also pattern within the Muslim community that needs to be also looked at? That do we have such a pattern whereby low caste Muslim women are also being, not whether forced or compelled into certain kind of marriages? Because this particular trend really goes back historically to colonial times. Now, I don't know which exact year, but I came across some report about these kind of abduction of these there were cases of kidnapping and abduction, so that the girls at a very young age were kidnapped and they were raised as upper caste girls because there was a big problem of missing women then also. But as far as India is concerned, this is one of the biggest challenges. So I think if this aspect could also be drawn into this very fantastic report, I think it will enrich our discussion further. And on that note, I'll just stop. Thank you.
And now we are going to Julian Levisk, and he's been, I think he gathers perspectives from Pakistan, India, and Europe. And he's been working on Sindh, he's been working in India, and as I was looking at his CV, it felt that he's more South Asian now than a European. Yeah. In fact, his PhD was on Sindhi nationalism and being Sindhi in Pakistan. So over to you, Julian, and we look forward to listening from you.
Thank you very much, Nadine, and thank you, Sufi Sahab, for inviting me. I hope you can hear me well. My connection doesn't seem to be that great, so at some point your voice was cutting when I was listening to
Yes,
the previous
we
comment.
can hear you. Yeah.
All right. So some of the points I'm going to raise have already been mentioned by Nate Roberts. So Sufi Hussein and I have been talking about these issues for some time, although I must also say that although I have been with Sufi Sahab, so what we had in common
Julian,
joint
sorry, excuse
intention
me.
of
Excuse me.
Sure, I'll shut the video.
Yeah, we can't hear you properly, and if you switch off your video, I think your audio quality would be better.
Yes. Right, I just did so.
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. So in our exchanges with Sufi Hussein, we shared a common interest in deconstructing some of the tenets of the dominant discourse or the dominant narratives pertaining to Sindhi society, especially about the place, for instance, of Sufism in society and various other aspects that have been used to define Sindhi identity. Of course, the issue of conversion is an important one, not only in Pakistan, in South Asia as a whole. And now, however, I'd like to raise maybe some critical points about the report, because I think some of the assumptions and statements and recommendations are problematic. So maybe the first point that made me a bit uneasy in the report was the systematic, the fact that it seems to systematically cast doubt on the work of NGOs and rights activists. So these are minority rights activists and human rights activists. So at many points in the report, and I mean, clearly at the beginning, it states that it will interrogate the public and hidden scripts of minority rights activists. And so it seems that one of the assumptions or the idea that comes back regularly in the report is that these NGOs so have no basis for their arguments and are reusing statements that lack evidence. And so there's this circular use of stories that are taken here to be fabricated. So the report goes on to argue that there is some kind of hidden script, and this assumption is at times explicit, at times not so explicit, but there's this idea that this hidden script is also inscribed in a kind of Islamophobia and seeks to malign both Islam and the state of Pakistan. So this raised a number of questions for me. I mean, if indeed there are some problems, or if the goal is to understand conversion and the issues it raises, then why discredit with such force the work of human rights organizations and various NGOs? Why not instead seek to suggest constructive criticism to help them perhaps strengthen their work? And if the documentation that they are trying to build is not solid enough, then why not seek to collaborate with them and try to help them improve their work? Elements that I wanted to mention, which have been mentioned by Nate Roberts, is the question of the majority power imbalance. And yes, this came back also in the comments of Sumit Maskar. So this idea that of course, when you have a dominant community, there is a kind of, this brings incentives and a kind of social pressure towards adopting the ways of the majority. And as Sufi rightly said in the beginning, in Sindh, many of the minorities are also Islamized in many ways, and perhaps in ways of, say, everyday life, say, using Islamic greeting terms rather than Hindu ones, for instance. So I think the idea of, so I think it would be important in the report or in further publications and in field work to take into account in a better way this power imbalance. At some point, the report does invoke social conditions as causes for conversion. So on page 50, for instance, it states that Islam can be a refuge for the underprivileged time, and I am sure that Sufi Hussain is very well aware of this. We may really question this assertion because there are many cases in which people convert and retain their castes. And for instance, in many villages in Sindh, we have many now Muslims who have retained their occupation as sweepers. And I've had discussions with people who were local UC Nazim, and someone who really wanted to change this situation, but explained to me how it was actually very difficult for him to try and change the local habits and caste relations among the people, even though in his village, really now the sweepers were converts to Islam. The report also, when it comes to majority-minority, often invokes the Indian context. But here, as Nate Roberts also pointed out, it is Muslims, of course, who are victims of majoritarianism. So I think it's important to analytically make these distinctions about the power imbalance and the minority-majority context. Ignoring this, I think, does not really help us understand the process of conversion, even though one of the great qualities and very interesting points of the report is to bring in a caste-based reading of these conversions within Hindus, so between an upper caste or a caste Hindu reading of these conversions and a Dalit perspective. Finally, I would like to comment on the recommendations of the paper, of the report. So I feel also reading the recommendations that the report is more concerned with the impact of the discourse on forced conversions on the image of Pakistan than with trying to understand the dynamics of conversions or the dynamics of inequality and injustice, and by suggesting to solve them. The report makes recommendations. The first is that clerics and the state of Pakistan shouldn't be falsely accused. A second recommendation is that the state should urge NGOs to desist from promoting a narrative, and that an entity adopted. And so in response to these, I hope it's not my voice. I would like to raise another few questions. I've already raised some questions about the NGO, the new placate so strongly and to condemn their work so strongly. But then I like to ask other questions. What is the report? Because it seems to me that the report in the end is recommending a kind of status. What would the report or what would be the recommendations when it comes to actually protecting the victims of conversions, if there are any, or when there are some? And if the existing laws are deemed sufficient, then how should they be enforced fairly and consistently in a way that prevents community pressure on conversion? If the accusations of forced conversions on clerics or made against clerics are false, then why not recommend a kind of dialogue between NGOs and clerics to try and implement a kind of greater understanding at the local level? We might add that if the issue of qualifying conversions as forced or faith in this very binary that is included in the title is a caste issue among Hindus, then why isn't the report proposing ways to, in general, but in this case among Hindus? And so we might also ask why the report is not proposing recommendations for equal treatment of newly converted communities, or for communities that have long converted to Islam, but are still treated as inferior in some situations. So just to conclude, I think that addressing such questions would help strengthen the report and the study, and perhaps bring the report away from a recommendation of keeping a status quo, the power of the dominant, the fragility of the weak.
Useful, and I think this is something that we were expecting. These critical comments will really help us, and we'll definitely have some reflections on them during this interaction as well. Now you can please switch on your video as well, so we can see you again. Yeah, thank you. In the panel now we have Dr. Saeed Did, and he is from Sindh, as Sufi told earlier, and though particularly he works in issues related to peace and conflict and international relations, but he's been writing on Sindh and, for example, Sindhi politics and forced marriages, local management in Sindh, and issues like that. And it will be important to hear from him as well. Dr. Saeed, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you.
No, it's broken.
Okay. My voice, I hope, is clear.
No, we cannot hear you properly.
Okay. Okay.
I think you too.
Can you hear? Should I close the video?
Yeah, it's better now. We can understand now.
Okay, maybe should I close the? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, my voice.
Yes.
Can you hear me? First of all, I would like to thank Ghulam Hussain and. Okay, yeah. Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank Ghulam Hussain, Sayyid Nadeem for making me part of this. I would really appreciate the IPS for taking up such local issues which were not on the agenda of IPS before. So it's very refreshing. I feel IPS is opening up its space, which is a very positive sign as well. So I also appreciate IPS for inviting the international scholars of repute in this panel discussion and making me part of this as well. So, but I would like to mention it would have been more appropriate if we had someone representing from those NGOs, because they have been criticized in this baseline study So if they would, I mean, some representative from them is here, we could have the opinion of the other side as well, which would have added much weight to this webinar, I guess. So I hope this suggestion will be taken into account in future. This study, in my understanding, as I could read this whole thing, I think it's very important part of a study, and Sufi Hussain has done well to problematize the word forced in conversion and marriages of Hindu girls with Muslim men in sin, which have been taken for granted previously. So that really helps making this complex picture and reality understand a bit better. So in that context, I would really like to appreciate Sufi Hussain and his study. And it also helps us understanding what kind of politics is being played over this issue in Sindh, and what is the role of NGOs and others. I agree with Julian that the way NGOs have been attacked in this, that could have been avoided, and that was unnecessary, I would say, the way it has been done, because taking in the NGOs in this debate would be much more useful than attacking them in the manner which has been done. So I think that one thing which Julian has mentioned already, I would again re-emphasize that NGOs should be, because human rights organizations and all that, they should be taken on board on this, and their voice should also be a part of this study, because without involving them and without hearing their side of story, this will be like one-sided story. I would say it is fair to question how far and what manner the element of force is being involved in Hindu girl marriages. But in my opinion, we cannot deny the existence of the genuine cases of force being employed as well. So that I think the impression which comes out of this is like there's, all the cases are fake, and that impression which is being created, I think, is also part of the problem, because if the same way, if you are criticizing the figures of 1000, which I can understand, which can be questioned, and quantitative, these kind of data are always problematic, because you cannot provide the exact data and exact access to how that data comes up. So that I think is the issue, not only with this study, but whatever sort of these kind of studies you will find, the data can be questioned in all those cases. But questioning data doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It means that the numbers can be questioned. It can be less than that, and it might be much less than that, but still the issue remains. So the manner in which this report is written, it feels like Sufi Hussain is trying to establish that there is no such issue as such forced conversion is there, which I think is a bit problematic, the manner and the way it has been presented. I would say that questioning the quantity and magnitude is justified, but just creating the impression that it doesn't exist is problematic for me. Uh, the other thing I would like to, okay, historicity, I think this is another important point which Michelle Bovin has also mentioned here. And the historicity is, in this study, the historicity of the faith conversion in India from Hinduism to Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity is mentioned. And it is simply assumed as if all that was to escape social exclusion. So social exclusion is given as an answer that this was the case because of this. But I think this presumption is very problematic and simplistic as well, because there were social exclusion cannot explain everything regarding conversion, as pointed out by Richard Eaton in his studies as well, that the case of Muslim majority areas should be, if it was social exclusion, then the Muslim areas, Muslim majority areas should be in the central India, where Brahman influence was the most prominent. But we have seen that Muslim majority areas were on the borderlines, like all the provinces which now frame Pakistan were on the borderlines. So if a conversion was based on that Brahmanic influence, then that should have been the case, which is not the case. And there are so many, other factors which have been mentioned by many other, scholars as well. So just focusing on this and saying social exclusion is, I think that is one other problem which I think is there. The other thing which I would like to mention here is that, like, why only Hindu and Christian girls, and why not Sikhs and Ahmadis? I mean, this is also issue which has been raised in the report as well, that this happens mostly with Hindus and Christian girls, and especially Ahmadis, in terms of religious, uh, freedom in Pakistan. Ahmadis have been the biggest target, as we know, but still, their women are not targeted, not like forced marriages and things like that. Doesn't happen with them. So, what is the issue of why Hindu and Christian girls only? That leads to the issue of poverty and social exclusion in a way, and the argument which Sufi Hussain has also tried to establish, that it's not just the issue of faith conversion. It's more of issue of empowerment of women as well. And I think that is a very important point which he has made, as compared, in this regard, that the women empowerment and women agency, in terms of love marriages, which are termed as conversion. Sufi terms them, as we have discussed it in our discussion as well, that he considers them in most cases are basically love marriages, where women agency is there, and that has been denied by the communities, and by the others. So I think that issue is very important, and that point which Sufi makes some sense. But we cannot say that in every case that applies. I know. There are quite a few cases where it's very hard to understand that it could be a love affair or something, because kids, like 12 years, 13 years, girls are captured and abducted and then converted. In those cases, I would not, it's hard to understand that it could be something like love affair or something. So there are issues which are mixed, I would say, that where you can say that, case to case, I think it varies, and we need to see that different cases are different. Um, Another thing which I think is very important, that why it is always Islam. Why, when love couples, maybe in Pakistan or maybe somewhere else, why they convert to Islam? Why not to other religion? If you talk about conversion, then if you look at it's also with the theology as well. Like theologically, it's very easy to convert. Because like Hinduism, I think it's very in theological terms as well, conversion is a bit tricky. But in Islam, and especially Catholics, like they have the mission of converting people, and that is also one part of it. And the other part, I think, is important, that marriage, because this is linked with conversion of girls, and forced conversion, forced marriage. These two things are interlinked here in this case. And in this case, then the other side of this is that marriage is also very easy in that environment, because then you just can, in terms of, if it is Christianity, marriage is much problematic then. And then also divorce is very problematized in Christianity, which is much easier in case of Pakistan, in case of Islam. So I think that theological side is also very important to look at, which has been missed as well. So maybe Sufi can add something on this and discuss it. Why it is always Muslim. Why it is always conversion to Islam, and why not other Otherwise, like even in India, it's more conversion to Islam, not to Hinduism. So this kind of explanation is also required, I guess. Um, I have a few suggestions for Sufi as well. Like I think he brings in quite a few debates into this, which are like in my opinion unnecessary debates. Like he brings in the debate of left and right. He brings in the debate of state and liberalism and all these things. I think that makes it uh, pitches it like the NGOs are liberal, and then Sufis trying to uh, be on the other side. So these kind of pitching between two lines and drawing borders and lines is problematic, I think. So, and it could be avoided. And as rightly pointed out by Julian, that if the intention is to understand the reality, and if the intention is to um, understand the reality better and make things better in that context, then you don't need to really create that left-right debate and really want to attack someone like that. The other thing is, I think, which I would also suggest that he can avoid bringing in the larger issue of religious freedom in Pakistan in this, because religious freedom is much more complex issue. And as I have worked on this recently on a paper, religious freedom in Pakistan and Malaysia, I can see, in terms of religious freedom, it's not just about the minority religions, but it's also about minority sects as well. Like religious freedom is more problematic vis-a-vis sects in Muslim majority countries as well. So religious freedom is much more larger issue, and involving it and passing some judgment on that is quite problematic. So I think it should be avoided, and he should focus more on that conversion issue. Uh, One more last suggestion, the final suggestion is that he should, I have seen his pictures on Facebook and others as well, that he has been meeting different, uh, you know, like he met with some people who are involved, some Gadi Nasheens and some peers and others. But I couldn't find anyone from the in those interviews, whether maybe Sufi can clarify that whether he met with the NGOs which he has criticized as well, like what is their take, and what is and collect data from them as well, and their side of the story. If he hasn't, then I would say that it should be included part of it. And because the most attack which he has made in his report is on Sindhi nationalists and NGOs. And in interviews and other things which he's going on conducting now, I don't see both of them included. So I would say that they should be included and made part of the study as well, because then we will have a much more complex picture. Thank you.
Fixing it at 90 minutes, and I think if we are going for another round of quick comments, we may need a few more minutes, and I think you'll bear with us. And yeah, and yes, I think Sufi Hussain should be able to give some of his thoughts on this, and then we'll take some quick comments from Nazir Meher, who is working with these communities in Sindh as yeah. Oh, there is some technical issue. He could not. Yeah. We have Nazir Meher sir. Can you, Nazir Meher sir? Are you there, sir? I think he's not. Dr. Farid Barohi, if you are along. Dr. Farid Brohi, are you still here? Okay.
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, Dr. Farid is the person who has recently supervised a thesis on group conversions in Sindh and Punjab, and I think he might have something to say.
Thank you very much, Nadeem Gilani and Sufi Hussain, for a very good presentation and report on this. I just want to say that there are some organizations who are gardening, or you can say giving some spaces for those persons who are being converted. And I will suggest one thing only for to Sufi, that he should go over there and have some interviews with those persons or those NGOs who are working for the new converts for Muslims, especially in Tharparkar and some of the areas of Mirpur Khas and some other suburb areas of those over there. So they will their data or their opinion should also be included within this. So they will also will inform Sufi Hussain, and it will, you can say, make this report more sufficient and more appropriate as some of the questions raised by Dr. Said Saab, and I think I will also second that their opinion, the opinion of the persons who are especially who are criticizing the issue, especially or those who are raising this issue, after saying that in an year 1,000 and more people are being converted within this in Sindh, especially from the Hindu community. I think this should also be included. Thank you very much.
Nazir Meher Saab, are you along? No, I think Sufi Hussain, you may have some comments on whatever has been said.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to all the panelists for very useful comments, and these comments will certainly shape further study. And I should have just given a brief profile of mine in baseline study as well, that because of the sake of brevity, we could not incorporate. Our idea was to make it, write it for the public, wider audience, not just for academics, with NGO reports that were often being cited. So this idea, I think, was not misplaced, and we did get feedback from public as well. People were reading this report, and some talk shows were also organized. Some people also, wrote newspaper articles on it. So in that sense, we were very successful. So we in that report particularly, focused on NGO reports, the narrative analysis of NGO reports, and social media content analysis, and we also incorporated two academic studies, probably the only academic studies on forced conversion in Pakistan, that of Jurgen Schäfflechner and Muhammad Wajid's thesis. But unfortunately, even scholars do not, read those studies, academic studies, and often cite NGO reports. And this was our contestation, that when we have academic studies, relatively very authentic academic studies, but our scholars, not to mention of NGOs, do not read those reports. What do they say about conversions in Pakistan? So this is also the part of the problem. I think that even our academics are carried by the rhetoric, which is very, very popular. So the aim of the report was also to, make people read a different perspective on conversion in Pakistan. So we kept it very short, and because of that, we could not incorporate the historical perspective in it. So what we did was to just refer to certain, readings that we did go through, and we wrote, a couple of sections on it, which could make up 2 articles reading in terms of size, on historical perspective on conversion, beginning with the beginning of Islam, and also the coming of Islam in South Asia, in particular in Sindh. the work of Darrell McLean on Arab history in Sindh, and Friedman Johannen's work on, generally on Sindh and also on religion, and also Chachnama and the commentary on Chachnama by Manan Ahmad Asif, you know very well. So there were also other readings as well, as pointed out by Michelle Bowen, that discussed the conversion in historical context. But because our aim was not to provide historical perspective in it, but to engage people to read or to understand how the rhetoric is created, how the narrative is created of conversion or forced conversion in Pakistan and globally, and how in this global world the local and national narratives can be problematized, or the context can be addressed. So this was our goal, and also to brainstorm scholars like you, to engage them, to get some feedback on it, so that we could better write this report. So the next time we will also be incorporating the historical perspective and how conversions took place in Arab history. And they thought that Hindus are Ahle Kitab, so there was no need to conversion, and that's true. And also they put certain kind of taxes, jizya, on Buddhists. Buddhists were merchant community, and they were just these indirectly forced to convert, not directly forced. So there are some cases as well in which those warriors, particularly Rajputs who are Brahmins who fought against the army of Arabs, they were probably forced to convert. They were few thousands, not many. So all these facts we did knew, but we could not incorporate into the report because we wanted people to read this report, and because people, there was a tendency not to read huge, bulky kind of book, so that's why we kept it very, very short. So yes, Ismaili, the work of Ismailis in Sindh was very, very pivotal, and in our next report, which we will publish, or the book, or the articles that will follow, we will cover Ismaili factor as well, in terms of the way they Islamized non-Muslims, and the way they gradually were converted, very, very very silently, you can say. There was no forced conversion involved. So we would definitely take into consideration these points in our future report. And Sumit Maskar's point was also very, very valid and very, I think, very much relevant. And we were not aware about. We did not take into consideration. We did not even thought about that sex ratio could also be the factor. So in next report, we would try to take into consideration gender ratio in terms of conversion, if it is influencing, also in terms of caste, or upper caste, or privileged caste and underprivileged caste, the way it affects conversions. And yes, also we would try to draw cross national comparisons with India as well, because our cultures are similar. So the cases from Haryana or UP, but also the way laws are being passed in India, particularly in UP, and anti-conversion laws previously we already have discussed. But in the next report, we will further highlight or shed our light upon these laws, vis-a-vis the laws being proffered or being suggested, recommended in Pakistan, forced conversion, laws against forced conversions. So we will spend much more energy on these aspects in our next report as well. The comments of Julian Levesque were very useful and very critical as well. In this our session, Sono Kangrani was supposed to join, but because of technical reasons, he could not join this session. And you know very well, maybe Dr. Saeed knows very well, that he is the leading human rights activist from the very community which is believed to be the most affected community. So we had took him on board, and I would also like to inform particularly Dr. Saeed Red that I interviewed not only religious clerics but also Dalits and Hindu panchayatis as well, and irrespective of that I should only focus on religious clerics. But because of the reasons of security and also because of certain other reasons, I also could not, everything is not put on the social media or Facebook. I also interviewed couples as well, paramers who got married, cross faith marriages, who converted and then got married with a Muslim male or female. I also interviewed them at various different places, but I could not, everything cannot be put on social media. So, so I think that in terms of covering the issues, my methodology was a kind of, snowball sampling. When I went there, the way I was informed about particular case, I just went there and interviewed them, irrespective of whether he's or she is a religious cleric or Muslim or non-Muslim. The data, the collection of data on the particular specific issue mattered for me more than just to focus upon religious clerics. So
just any interview of NGOs or Sindhi nationals?
Yeah, I also interviewed. Yeah.
Any interview of?
Yes,
okay.
I also interviewed 4 or 5 Sindhi nationalists as well. GN Khoso, former president of Awami Tehreek. It is the leading and the largest nationalist party in Sindh presently. Previously it was Jaskam, but now I think it is Awami Tehreek. And also Dalit activists or workers of Awami Tehreek like Mohib Beal and many others. So I can share you all details. I have, interviewed about 100 plus people this time. It was intensive kind of data collection, and it was mostly recorded, off the record as well as on the record, and it makes about 900 GB of video recording. So it's a huge amount of data that can be, further, critically analyzed. And also interviewed whole families who converted. So, and also I saw the record, sanads and register. Now we have the record of converted people from about 20 religious seminaries. It is for the first time that that much data has been collected by any researcher on conversion in Pakistan that we have now. But we have still so far not analyzed because it is just freshly, collected. So it was very important, and also to engage religious clerics initially. So I got the data. Now we can assess that what is the ratio of the converts in terms of gender and age, and it will be very clear after the analysis of the data that what is the ratio of individual females, underaged or adult, converting to Islam and the families converting to Islam. Our the surface analysis shows that majority of cases, 90% of cases are mass conversions or other types of conversions. Only 5 to 10% may be these cases of couples or paramers converting from one religion to another religion for the sake of marriage. So this is also the very important factor that at least academics should take into consideration while discussing or debating conversion as a whole process. So general impression is that majority of conversions are of underaged girls. So far the data, which is still unanalyzed, I'm just sharing with you my fieldwork impressions, that majority of the cases of conversion are mass conversions. The whole families have converted, the whole villages have converted, and in thousands. So nobody takes notice of it, nobody have analyzed what factors lay behind this. And other issue that should be taken into consideration is the general tendency, universal tendency to convert to Islam. It is not just particularly in Pakistan or Sindh, it is happening in India as well, it is happening in Europe as well. And there, as I have also cited the study of Katie Sian in UK, they also allege that those who non-Muslim, they allege that forced conversion is happening in UK as well. So, but according to Katie Sian, it is not forced conversion. She herself is a Sikh. So these, I think, scholars should also take into consideration these studies as well. Also, Nathalie Roberts' work is very important. That's why we also took him on board, and we thought that he would also join us. He is very much concerned about extremism within secular, those who are secular minded. So we are not against secularism, and we have proactively tried to engage NGOs as well. And when we wrote this report, we did not write this report in isolation. We kept in contact with NGOs. We got the data from them. We asked them different questions. We also asked them to collaborate. So it would be interesting for you to know that Asif Akil from minority Christian community, he's on board with us on this issue. There are certain points on which he diverges with us, but generally he agrees that forced conversion is the way it is being presented by NGOs is very problematic. Asif Akil is the leading human rights activist from a Christian community, and I would say, from my personally, as I see him, I think he's the best scholar on minorities in Pakistan. So I think that we have on board most of the scholars and human rights activists who are serious to engage with this issue. Sono Kangrani, you know very well that he's if not the leading, he's one of the leading activists, human rights activists, writer in terms of all issues that pertain to human rights, Dalits. And he himself is a Dalit from Megwar community. And we maybe in the next session of from this forum, we may engage all those NGO activists, patrons of NGO to whom you are pointing out. So I think that it should not be thought that we are deliberately avoiding NGOs or HRCP or Shirkat Gav, whatever NGO it may be. So we are always ready to collaborate and work with them on this issue and discuss with them at any forum, just for the sake of understanding. We are not trying to pushing agenda, but nevertheless, I believe, I think now that after doing this research for 7 years, that no field is neutral. There is politics as well. There is subjectivity. And when I began doing research in 2016, my PhD research, my first protest as an academic activist was against forced conversion and was against Mia Mitha, was in favor of Hindu rights activist, and I played very important role in organizing that protest before Hyderabad Press Club. So it was the beginning of my research. But gradually it unfolded to me that this issue is not the way it is being presented, and there's a lot of politics. And the politics is not just local. No. So this is a very important factor that I would like scholars to take into consideration, because now we are living into global sort of village kind of world. So Pakistan is not cannot be seen in isolation from what is happening in India, and vice versa, and also what is happening globally. So the power of social media and the way the narrative has been constructed, and not only historically in the context of sin, but historically throughout the globe, how the narrative against Muslims or Islam or Islamophobia should also be taken into consideration. That I think that we must pay attention to as well. And yes, majoritarianism in Pakistan, as Julian point out, could be problematic as well. And because of that, we think that our team should be multi-religious and multi-caste. And if we are serious to deal this issue or do justice with it, we would also like to take on board scholars from Europe. We also invited Jürgen Schäfflechner, and also Julian, as we did invite to Julian or Michelle Bowen. So we are open to anybody to debate with the open heart the whole issue. So I think that we need to collaborate, and our team should be multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and scholars should be hailing from different departments. We need anthropologists, we need sociologists as well. Initially, we need anthropologists. Then we might also, when we would be conducting social surveys, we would be needing some sociologists as well. So also from different communities as well. So we are not trying to evade these epistemological challenges, and gradually I hope that we will overcome that in next report. But initially, it was very important for us to publish a baseline study to take on board scholars like you and others who are still not, who are not part of this, session, but who are otherwise on board, and they know very well. And we are also discussing with them, also from persons from NGO, persons from, activists or intellectuals from upper caste Hindus. So we also have interviewed them as well. So it would be erroneous or misleading to get impression from our work or social media activism that we are just trying to take the opinion of only religious leaders. I think there was more to discuss later.
I know the point where could not person, but still, the head has right to connect with us. There's some audio could not reach us. Can you connect with us now?
Thank you, Nadeem Saab. I'm not sure whether I'm audible to you or not.
You are audible now.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't have any detailed input so far as the academic side is concerned. The research quality and other stuff, certainly there has been some good discussion in presence of Julian, Dr. Reid, and other experts. Certainly, I may not be qualified in it, but I would like to highlight politics of this debate coming from interior sin. Certainly, it is very polarizing subject, is Dr. Reid also knows, and Sufi Saab is well aware about. There's a huge polarization, and it has been historic. Certainly, last 2.5 decades, I would say, that has taken a different turn. There is sort of advocacy. Advocacy on human rights or politics of human rights in the context of conversion in Sindh has been linked with this issue of forced conversions. At academic and intellectual level in Sindh, it has always been one-sided. To me, value of this publication, this baseline and effort of Sufi, which is certainly not perfect, there are certain gaps which have been very ably highlighted by all, and Sufi is also accepted that it requires significant improvement. To me, the value of this publication is that it is probably the first ever academic research-oriented effort in this arena. The stuff that we have so far seen, to my knowledge, there is huge lack of research or evidence-based conclusions. So certainly there's a need to incorporate the opinion of other side on the polarization, as Dr. rightly pointed out, and come up with something objective and create a dialogue forum the way IPS is done, which also includes other sides. Certainly, then it will be very easy to come up with right conclusions. But I would say, to me, the value of this publication of Sufi is that it is first ever attempt to bring a research, analysis, and data. And there is certainly room to refine that, improve that, include certain other key informants and focus group discussions of other side as well, so that we have something more comprehensive, where there is some sort of symbiosis of various opinions. My feeling is, I mean, my impression, I would say, it's not very research oriented. If we look at some of the indicators, for example, if there has any case gone to any judicial forum, generally the converted girls or boys have stick to the conversion. So it is one of the important indicators, in my opinion, that have been highlighted probably in the report as well. But there is a room to discuss it further, improve that. But I must appreciate the work of Sufi and also that of IPS to create this forum. There is room to widen this forum to include other people as well. And this type of research should be updated, widely circulated. So this is all I have to contribute to this debate. Thank you very much.
to say, Dr. Govind, if you have some quick comment before we close.
No, I think that the discussion was very interesting, but I cannot say more because I think it should be the opportunity to organize another webinar because I cannot deal with all the interesting ideas that have been put on board in a few minutes. So only I want to say that many very interesting ideas were expressed by the participants, and also thank you for the comment of Sophie Hussein.
Sumit?
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add. I think it has been a very enriching discussion, and I look forward to your analysis of the very rich data that you have collected, in terms of interviews and different kind of documents. And I think that should really come out, as soon as you can. So that we are really looking forward to that. Congratulations.
Thank you. Julian?
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you for your response, Sufi Saab, and I enjoyed the other comments as well. I think it was very rich, and I can also say, of course, I'm really looking forward. I'm very impressed by all the data you've collected. I could see sometimes on social media that you were traveling a lot in southeastern Sindh and meeting various kinds of people. So also looking forward to the analysis of that data.
Thank you. Said Saab?
Thank you. I would, I agree with all of them that it's wonderful work which Sufi is doing, and we can see that he has really collected a lot of data, which is very useful, and for the first time, such data of this magnitude is collected on conversion issue. So I really am looking forward to it, and hopefully this will be, I think, first time that we will have such a comprehensive study on conversion in Pakistan. So we are really looking forward. In future, whenever you need anything, I'm always available. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, our colleague Nabil Farooq has to say something.
I just wanted to add one clarification that this impression that it is a sort of witch hunt against the NGOs which have published these reports, I think it should be clarified. Most of the people who have done this in HRCP and Aura Foundation, CPI, Shikaka, all these NGOs are friends. And as GM operations of IPS, I can assure you that I personally sent these reports to them when they were published, and they also attracted a wide media coverage. And to our surprise, not only there was no official response from these NGOs, even at the personal level, these friends of mine, they didn't respond to it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I ask and request Khalid Rahman, Executive President, Institute of Policy Studies, for his comments to conclude this session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Nadeem. And thank you, Sufi, for involving all of us in a debate which is so important for all of us here in Pakistan and even outside Pakistan. Let me begin by sharing the quote of one of the former UK Prime Minister back in 19th century, Benjamin Disraeli. I'm sure you may have, all of you would have heard about that quote. We have a Urdu translation also by Mushtaq Yusfi, that lies are of three types: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Today, he said it in 19th century, died in 1881. Today we are living in a world where the technological advancement particularly in communication and media, has added new dimensions to all these kinds of lies. That is creation, reproduction, and multiplication beyond all boundaries, including the geographical one. It is not surprising then that this has become the most important tool in any kind of conflicts and competitions. Be they are related to any area of human life, politics, uh, business, economics, or society and civilization. Here, let me share another quote of the same guy, Benjamin Disraeli. He says, and I quote, "Time is precious, but truth is more precious." I regard today's session extremely reassuring in the sense that it has participation of people who believe in this maxim. The feature that has brought them together is nothing but honestly and dedicatedly try to find the truth and bring it to fore. As a think tank, finding and highlighting the truth is and has remained our passion, and we continue to identify such people. Mr. Sufi is indeed one of them, and I'm glad that he has joined us with a lot of knowledge, expertise, and network on a subject that, as I said, is so significant for all of us in a number of ways. One of the distinctive character of his personality is the quality of a good scholar, that he is always ready to listen to counter perspectives and ready to rethink his views. In fact, that is the reason that when we discussed the launching of this report, which was originally about 500 pages, if I correctly recall, 400 something, when we discussed that report and presented the idea that instead of launching the whole report right now, we should go for a baseline study, he immediately agreed to that. And now organizing this seminar was also in the same spirit that we should have feedback from the experts on the subject. As has been shared, he has just returned after an extensive visit of the area, and thus he will surely be able to add and address the comments that have been made here. As for the next steps, as Sufi has just mentioned, this is an ongoing project, and several dimensions highlighted here are very much on our agenda. But before I conclude, let me go back again to Benjamin. He said, and I quote, "When men are pure, laws are useless. When men are corrupt, laws are broken." With this in perspective, our aim is to address the whole subject, not only in the form of a research study or research report, but in the context of legal arena, along with religious, social, economic, and other political arenas. I think Naufal has already mentioned that the baseline study, and again, we have not published it in the form of a final study. It has been shared with all relevant NGOs, but they did not have the courage to even acknowledge that. I mean, this is very unfortunate. And as far as the expression is concerned, I think Saeed Rit Saab rightly pointed out, there is always room for improvement. The expression that you have made, we need to be less political and more intellectual in our expression. But let me also share as a footnote, and I have a lot of information because early morning I studied this EU Disinformation Lab report. It's a long report, you can't study it. But in this overall context, I went through the EU Chronicle, which is part of that report. Now, this EU Chronicle has come into being only 6 months back, May 2020. And from May 2020 until now, it has a lot of material, but it has 19 opinion-based articles, 19. And this EU Disinformation Lab report has informed us that as far as the aims and objectives of this whole Indian operation are, they included to create narrative, to give a bad name to Pakistan, and to give a bad name to China. Now, along with that, they want to create a better image of India in India, for Indian audience also. Of course, outside world, it is very, it's a common sense that they would like to create a better image. But within India also, they want to create a better image of it. Now, with that in mind, when I went through all the 19 articles, I found in 6 months, 8 articles are about Pakistan. 8 articles. And I don't have time, but I have details here. If I just read out the titles, and you will find how damaging these are about Pakistan. And out of the remaining 11, 6 are against China. Again, the titles will let you know that how damaging these are. And then 5 are about the whole world. And as has been mentioned in the report, one can find that there are certain, the same members of parliament have been named as the writer, maybe 3, 4, 5. All of them have written these articles. So in this overall context, while one may say that the expression is apolitical, but you can't ignore, as Sufi said, the truth, and as the Benjamin said, that there are few people who go for the truth, who have time to find out the truth. And we are living in a day where getting information is not difficult. But the problem is to get the right kind of information and true information. So with all this in perspective, we shall try to be objective as much as possible, to the extent humanly is possible. That is one of the values that we have kept before us from day one at IPS. And in fact, we feel that there will be no reason for our survival and for our existence if we compromise on the truth. That is our strategy, and in that context, I think whatever feedback has been given by the panel, in fact, it has been a very strong panel, and many times it happens that people comment without reading the text and even write the reviews without going through the text. But all of you, in fact, have gone through it, have shared very frank comments. In fact, we would like to further involve you in whatever way we are progressing in this. Thank you once again to all the panelists, to all the participants, and we look forward to meet you again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I think this is developing consensus that this is not the final webinar on the subject, and I think we'll be exchanging our views again, maybe sometime down the line, maybe with some other scholars as well. And thank you. And as you said, we look forward to more explorations from Sufi's study. Thank you. Thank you, and have a very good Christmas and a New Year. Goodbye.